On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, I welcome Dee Squire to the Buck and Honey's remote studios. Dee Squire, a woman whose life has been shaped by strength, family, and love, diagnosed with a rare form of muscular dystrophy shortly after giving birth to her son. Dee has faced her challenges head on. From walking with a cane to using a wheelchair, she's never let her condition define her. Dee hopes her story will help those who might have the same experience. This will be a good one. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up wherever you are or whatever you are doing? I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios on the north side of our great capital city of Madison, Wisconsin. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow the podcast on Facebook at Survive and Thrive 8791, the podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you listen to the show. Leave me a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to tell their story, email me at tdecora@gmail.com. Glad you could join us today. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will air on Monday and Thursday morning, featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, mental illness, success despite challenges, etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. This is where we get into the episode and guest intro. According to the internet, and the internet is always right, correct, Dee?
Right.
Right, she says. According to an AI, artificial intelligence overview, here we go, Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy. Say that 5 times in a row. FSHD is a genetic muscle disorder in which the muscles of the face, shoulder blades, and upper arms are among the most affected. The estimated prevalence of FSHD are about 4 cases per 100,000 individuals. Now, I'm not a big math guy, but I like to put this into perspective for the people that are listening today. So with about 340 million people in the U.S. of A., that's about 13,600 people each year. So if there's a math teacher out there that wants to correct me on that, go ahead and email me. Today, I welcome Dee Squire to the Buck and Honey's remote studios, born in Biloxi, Mississippi, and raised in Sunnyvale, California. Dee would graduate from Milton, Massachusetts High School and is a wildcat. And she says, leading up to this, that she was wild. Shortly after graduating from high school and with encouragement from her older sister, Dawn, Dee would take her talents to Madison, Wisconsin. She would eventually land in Waunakee, Wisconsin, where she is happily living in retirement. Today, I'm so glad you could join us. Dee Squire, what is up?
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
It is great to see you. It's actually great to be in. This is my old neighborhood. For those of you that are listening today, the remote studio is in Waunakee, and I used to live about 2 or 3 blocks from here. So we live below the sledding hill in Waunakee, and so I'm quite familiar with this part of Waunakee.
And I know you through my son.
Yes, Brad I got to know the 2 Brads. Brad Myers through former colleague Craig Myers, was a teacher at the high school in Waunakee, Wisconsin, where I worked at. And of course, then because I got to know Brad Myers, I got to know Brad Squire. Right. And we had a couple of little trips that we talked about back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I love both of those guys because we have a common denominator, and that is basketball. Yes. I'm so glad Brad reached out a few months ago, and you reached out, I believe, on Facebook somewhere, and you wanted to tell your story, and I think that's important to know for the listeners that if anybody wants to tell their story, I have the platform to do that, and I'm glad we had that connection of Brad. I know we're going to talk about some of this later, but you lived in all the directions of the U.S., and what I mean by that is the North, Wisconsin, the South for a little bit in Mississippi, the East in Massachusetts, and the West in California. So besides Wisconsin, because we always lean towards where we live now, and you lived here for quite a while, what was your favorite?
I think I really enjoyed going to the East Coast from the West Coast because it was so different. And I was able to be independent. I was always a really independent young person. Mm-hmm. So I really liked Boston area. Milton was right outside of Boston. And so I was able to discover a lot of the Boston area, and I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah, I think I have to make this quite clear to some of our listeners, because we have a lot of listeners. By the way, I'm in 15 countries now, which is kind of cool, the podcast. But for those of the people that are, a lot of my listeners are from Wisconsin, people might be thinking, Milton, Wisconsin? No, Milton, Massachusetts. So your favorite was that kind of outside that Boston area. Mm-hmm. With summer right around the corner, what do you look forward to in the summer?
I'm going to try something new this summer in about a month, and it's adaptive kayaking. So I was introduced to a kayak that has been adapted to somebody that has disabilities. And through UW-Madison Adapted Fitness, I was able to get in and out of the kayak with a little bit of help. But it is designed and all set up to get on the water. So I'm anxious to try that. Where
are they going to be putting you in? Mendota, Monona?
Mendota, and it's with the Hoofers organization. So it's right there by the Union is where we're going to put in.
With the Hoofers organization. So that would be good that if any of the listeners in the Madison, Wisconsin area has or knows somebody that is like you, mm-hmm. adventurous, courageous, independent, and somebody's looking to go do something, they might try the Hoofers organization to get them into a kayak. Our good friend, Doug Schutz, this might be something that he could try because of his situation, and he's in the wheelchair. Would you be willing to try what he's doing this spring? Do you know what he's doing?
I do. Skydiving. No, thank you.
He is skydiving, our good friend.
He's more courageous than I am.
Yes, our good friend Doug Schutz, who appeared, I don't remember what episode, I think it was in the 50s, episode 50-something. He fell out of a tree and is a quadriplegic, but he does not, he's very much like you. He does not let anything hold him back, and he's got a smile on his face, and he's going to be jumping out of a plane. I have often said maybe I might join him, because if Doug can do it, well, I can do it. Before we get to your story, I need to talk about our sponsor. So our sponsor, Buck and Honey's Restaurants, are a place that people can escape to. For me, it's a great escape from cooking dinner. Do you cook dinner?
We do. I say we because my husband and I do that together. He helps out.
This is where we need that button that goes, aww.
Yes.
With their great food and drink menu, 5-star customer service, which is what I think you have here at your place, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere, people keep coming back. With locations in Sun Prairie, Monona, Waunakee, and Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, most communities in the Dane County area, and that's just the surrounding Madison, Wisconsin area, can get to a Buck and Honey's within 10 to 15 minutes. And this is where I do a little drum roll. Have you been to Buck and Honey's?
Yes. In fact, we don't go out to eat very often, but
when we do,
we do like to go to Buck and Honey's.
And I did have to ask this when we were setting up the show and talking about the script, because of the ease for you to get in?
Yes, they're very accommodating, and there's plenty of room. They have great food, great customer service. It's just a good experience.
Check. And then the food, your recommendations from Buck and Honey's.
We always get the same thing, it seems like. I love the flowers, which is cauliflower and Brussels sprouts, which Bob doesn't like, so I get to have them there with a balsamic dressing.
Glaze?
Yeah, glaze. And Bob likes the fish tacos, which is something I wouldn't care for, but I'm glad he likes them.
Yeah, fish tacos are big on my menu choice, but I usually go with the pizza. The Bomber's Special is what I've been eating since the mid-'80s.
Okay.
So I know the owner well, and he's from my hometown of Wisconsin Dells. I've been eating that for a long, long time. On the podcast, our guests will follow the format for sharing their story like this. In segment 1, we talk about what was it like. So we'll hear a little bit of Dee's history, and Dee's going to be a multi guest on the show because she's got some layers to her that I think her story would benefit a lot of people. We'll have her back on, but she's going to share some of her history today. And then she's also going to share what happened. That is to get her on the podcast. In segment 2, we continue to talk about what happened, and then we get into what it's like now. We discuss her 5 suggestions for thriving. You grew up in Sunnyvale, California. I've heard of that place, but have never been to it. What was life like growing up for you in Sunnyvale, California?
There were 4 of us in the family. My dad was a stockbroker in San Francisco. My mom was a nursery school teacher, and my older sister was very driven, and she was really good at everything. It was during the 60s and 70s, so during the hippie movement. It was an interesting time to be there.
I'll give the listeners, a little perspective without having them go to their phones and ask Google, where is Sunnyvale, California? It's just below San Francisco, kind of in that, is it San Jose, San Mateo area?
It's near San Jose. It's actually Silicon Valley. It's where Cupertino's the next town over, which is where Apple is. So it's quite different now.
You laid the framework for all of those companies that came in, you and Dawn, your sister.
Actually, it was a different time for sure, because I would do things like hitchhike from Sunnyvale to go to San Francisco, because I was just very
courageous like your older sister.
Yes, yeah.
And we found out earlier that you are a little independent as well.
Yes.
For the young listeners, when they hear the word hitchhike, which I don't recommend doing for a young lady or really anybody anymore, what was that like? So you'd get up in the morning, you'd have your breakfast, and you want to go to San Francisco. I'm going to shut my yapper. You tell us.
You just put your thumb out there, and someone picks you up and takes you there. And it's kind of scary, and it's definitely not something you would do now. But back then, it was a different time, and we were much freer.
Yes, much freer. So when you would get on the 2-lane county road or the interstate or the highway, were there other hitchhikers out there?
Oh, yeah. But it could turn out to be bad. So I didn't have any of those experiences, but thankfully.
But thankfully you didn't.
Yeah.
So you talked about your mom and your dad and your sister. You would then graduate, you would migrate to Milton, Massachusetts, and you would be in the class of 1971 from Milton, Massachusetts High School, where you are graduated a Wildcat. What caused that? Why did you go out there?
My dad thought it was a good idea to send me there to help. My grandmother had just retired, and he thought it would be good for me to go and live with her, and it was a very good experience. It was a good high school experience, and she was very loving and caring, too.
Loving and caring. And we're going to put this little teaser out that we'll tell, and the next time we have you on the show, we're going to tell why you moved out there, the behind-the-scenes stuff that I think your dad protected you from, but we'll get into that. But I think that is so cool. I had a really, really good relationship with my great uncle, but I referred to him as Grandpa Reuben. And it sounds like you had a great relationship with your grandma.
She was a lovely lady, yes.
And took care of you and kept you on the straight and narrow. But you did say you were a Wildcat. So when you moved to Milton, Massachusetts, were you trying to fit in? Your wildness came out that was not around in Sunnyvale?
I think I was a little wilder in California, yeah.
You had to be to fit in out there, I bet.
Yes.
So after high school, your older sister, Dawn, would encourage you to move to Madison, Wisconsin, and you had lived there, or you had come to visit because your mom was from Madison. How come you moved to Madison? besides your sister's encouragement?
She encouraged me to come here because she said it was fun. It was a college town. I was only 17 at the time. My parents had moved from Northern California to Southern California while I was gone to near the Boston area. So I really didn't feel like I had a home to go home to. So she encouraged me to come and live with she and her husband for a short time. And I started working.
Mm-hmm.
So
you move here with your sister's encouragement. And then, I don't know how long it was after you come to Madison, but your sister and her husband then would pick up and move. They would go ahead.
They left and went to Colorado. So I was here alone.
Fending for yourself.
Yeah. Took over the apartment at age 18, and rent was $125 a month, and I think I made $61 or something a week. So grew up really fast.
You did. What were you doing for work back then? Those people that are from Madison, you can maybe, people that remember that time or heard stories, where were you working?
At the Century House on the west side of Madison, a Scandinavian furniture and gift store. And when I started out, I rode a bicycle from the east side of Madison over to the west side of Madison. That was my transportation until I got a car.
So you had to cut through campus?
I did.
And that was, would you ride your bicycle during the winter?
No. In October, I got a car.
In October. Yeah. That was probably a little smarter.
Yeah.
In 1975, you would marry the love of your life, mm-hmm. Bob Squire. Tell us how you met. This will bring back a lot of memories, for the Wanakee crowd here. A lot of people met this way, but again, go ahead and tell us.
We met at Rusty's, and that was a long time ago. Rusty's is no longer there, but it was at that time one of the places you could meet, and they had a pretty decent dance floor, which they didn't have that so much downtown Madison.
For the listeners that are not from the Wanakee area, just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Middleton is a neighboring town, and Middleton used to have a bar called Rusty's, and I've heard stories since I've been taught in Wanakee, got to know a lot of parents and grandparents. I find it interesting that a lot of people met for the first time at Rusty's. Mm-hmm. And we've got a bell going off in the background.
My grandmother's
clock
was right outside my bedroom when I lived with her. Isn't that cool?
It is. You meet Bob. You guys dance at Rusty's. They got a great dance floor. Where did you guys get married?
At the courthouse in Madison.
At the courthouse in Madison.
Mm-hmm. Big
shindig. Did you guys have a reception at Rusty's?
No.
So shortly after then, you welcome somebody into the world. Shortly after your son Brad is born. But during that time, you start to notice that you're not feeling quite right. What was going on?
It was mostly that I was favoring one side. One leg was stronger than the other. And I would go upstairs at the store that I was working at, the Century House, and that's when I noticed it. And they couldn't do any diagnoses really until after the baby was born. So when he was 3 months old, I was able to have a myelogram, which gave me some results. They first thought it was either a tumor on the spine, a ruptured disc, or MS, and it was none of those. They originally thought it was Charcot-Marie-Tooth nerve disease, which is named after 3 French doctors. It wasn't until later, when you could test things through DNA, that I got the proper diagnosis of Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy.
Because at that time in life, the 60s, 70s, maybe even in the 80s, there were some things that weren't talked about. There was the code of silence. We don't talk about what things are going on in a household. We don't talk about maybe even our ailments because we don't want people to feel sorry for us. Did you know any history, mom's side of the family or dad's side of the family? Did you have any genes and genetics that led to that?
Yes, this is definitely passed on. My dad had some weaknesses, but not as severe as what I have. My grandmother, the one I lived with, I remember her telling me that I would be having trouble with my legs as I got older, as she did, but she was never using a walker or a wheelchair like I do.
So their severity was not quite as
Right.
as what yours was.
Mm-hmm.
Because our listeners want to hear the coping skills you use to get through the initial diagnosis, the initial start of this, and what life has been like so far, I need to talk about our sponsor one more time. So Buck and Honey's has been with the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew since the beginning, with 4 locations in the Madison, Wisconsin area. One is always near. People ask me why Buck and Honey's owner Tom Anderson places a high priority on the mental health of his employees. He has a mental health professional for them should they need support. I don't know how many businesses go above and beyond their EAP, Employee Assistance Program, but Buck and Honey's does. Shortly after Dee Squire's son Brad is born, she is diagnosed with Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy. In segment 2, you'll hear how Dee has lived a happy life, been married for 50 years, and raised a son, all while battling FSHD. She will tell you how she survived and is thriving in her early 70s. Please stay tuned. Don't change that dial. You're not going to want to miss segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. We will be back.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help and resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365 and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Emergency Crisis Services, dial 911. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dial 988. To connect via web, chat, visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to say 3 words. I need help. Now, back to the show.
We are back. Welcome back to segment 2 of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Tim Decora. The podcast is where I feature guests who share their story in hopes of helping others who may be struggling with what life throws at them. Dee Squire is here to share her story about how she hasn't let FSHD, Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy, slow her down. She hopes her story will help others who might be in a similar situation to survive and thrive, just like she has so far in life. Segment 2, we're going to continue our conversation with Dee Squire. Since the show has a mental health component to it, did you experience any anxiety dealing with the unknown with your diagnosis, or depression thinking about what life was like, what life was going to be like? Any of those two?
Yes, I probably more so now than early on, because early on my symptoms were quite mild. It wasn't until the last 25 years that the progression has gotten pretty strong. And every year something different happens, so I never know for sure what the future is going to be like. So there's a bit of anxiety, wondering, where am I going to be in 5 years? But I can't keep going to look that far ahead and be upset about it. So I definitely take an antidepressant and have for quite a while. A low dose, very common for people with disabilities to be depressed. And I don't want to stay in that state. I tried going off of the antidepressant and just didn't like anything. And so I decided I didn't want to live like that. So that's actually one of the few prescriptions that I do take.
Well, you had a built-in coping strategy, and we're going to talk about some of those strategies here a little bit, but you had a built-in coping strategy when you got the diagnosis, and I think it helped that your symptoms were mild, but you also had that coping strategy of Brad, and you had to raise a child and do all that stuff that goes on through the first couple of years of life. And then you also had a brand new husband, a soulmate to be with. Raising Brad, talk a little bit about that.
Fortunately, the fact that my symptoms were mild, I was able to do all of the things that we wanted to do with him: camping, water skiing, skiing, all the things. And so that was really great. I think it's a lot harder to cope with having something happen, such as a stroke or an accident, where with FSHD, it's a slow process. Originally it was for me, so you had time to think about it and adjust to those changes. And my husband was able to adjust as those changes were happening. For example, getting up from a low chair became difficult, and so I had to make arrangements and changes to accommodate that.
Well, I know when I was doing my homework for the episode, I saw that FSHD is a diagnosis that affects the upper body, face, shoulder, etc., but that it's not a fast-acting, debilitating. I mean, I suppose it probably could be, but it in the description it said that it's not fast-acting and it doesn't move in quick and puts you in a wheelchair immediately. But that over time, like you said, you do have some time to kind of think about it. And I think in talking with you before, adapting is something that you, in addition to your independence, you're able to adapt. Talk about life then, that slow progression of you were doing all kinds of things, skiing, water skiing, biking, camping, and then all of a sudden you had to maybe start to gravitate toward a walker or a wheelchair.
Yes, I did, and we had to get a little bit creative with things, such as, how are we going to manage the wheelchair and the vehicle with me still wanting to drive with hand controls, trying to figure out a way that I could still do that. When some people said, I don't think you're going to be able to do that, I'm like, watch me. So I have it figured out so I can independently drive. I drive my wheelchair in the back of the van, stay strong enough so I can take a step out and pivot and get into the driver's seat. I'm kind of stubborn that way.
I think a good coping skill that you have is if you have it, is that you're stubborn and you don't like to have people tell you that you can't do something. I think that if somebody doesn't have that, they might have to start to develop that mental attitude of, look, I'm not going to have you tell me what I can't do. I'm going to show you what I can do. Mm-hmm. And so you maybe like the challenges and the obstacles, and those things keep you motivated.
Yeah, one example is I attend UW Adapted Fitness and become exposed to students that are going in to become nurses, doctors, OTs, PTs, and they're wonderful. They're passionate about what they do. And I had gotten rid of my bicycle, thought I couldn't ride a bicycle anymore, and they had a day where they brought in all these bicycles, and I got on one of those bicycles, and I remembered and realized how much I love riding a bicycle. So it wasn't long after that I invested in a electronic tricycle. And even though I might look really silly riding around town, I love it. And I've gone already 6 times since the 1st of April, every Sunday afternoon for an hour or more. And it makes me feel really good to be able to still do that.
Well, I wouldn't think you're silly. I would think, hey, there's Dee getting her exercise and waving at her and maybe honking my horn. I wouldn't think that at all. And I think that is so cool that, again, you're adapting, you're finding ways that maybe the two-wheeler isn't what's going to work anymore. Some people might say, well, I'm just going to quit and not bike anymore. But fortunately for the people at the UW hospital, they brought you some adaptive things you could use, and I might have to gravitate toward the tricycle someday, but at least I now know that I will be able to have that option. Once you got that diagnosis and then you're starting to navigate life, who were you leaning on for support? Husband, gal pals, coworkers? I suppose it kind of changed, but those are the people that are in your inner circle. Who are you leaning on?
My husband, mostly, and our son and his wife. Bob has just been fantastic. What's great about him, in particular, is that he knows about how I like to be independent. So there's that fine line of trying to figure out how much to help somebody, but not to hover and be doing too much for them, to allow them to do the things that they can still do. And I think that's really important. But yeah, he's been supportive and willing to do whatever it takes to help out.
I know we had scheduled a time a couple of days ago to meet, and we were thinking about times to come over and talk about setting up the episode and just doing a little Q&A and getting to know one another. And you said that you were going to kick out some women that were in your house and they were going to have to leave early because you got this guy coming over. What group was that?
Those are my friends from the pool, and they're very supportive. The ladies from the pool, they come over for some sewing. I also have a group that comes over from our church where we do knitting for outreach in the community. We knit blankets and hats and things. So I have a lot of supportive people in my life that are willing to help out.
Let's go backwards a little bit to the pool. Where and what pool do you go to?
I go to Harbor Athletic Club, and there are two things. There's not a lot of information about exercise for this condition, as you probably noticed. There's a lot of unknowns, which is why I've had to really research and try to discover things. Bicycling with an exercise bike is one, and I do that here at home and also at the gym up at the Village Center in Wanakee. But they do highly recommend the pool. So Bob takes me to the pool twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, and I'm able to get on the pool lift, and he can lower me down into the water, and I love the freedom of being able to walk in the water without having to hang on to anything. The water is very therapeutic. It's a warm water pool, and there's all these wonderful ladies and men, but mostly the ladies. We just share a lot of, anything that we have things going on. Everybody has something going on if they're there in that warm therapeutic water. So it's very, very good.
It's important to have gal pals.
Yes.
All right, you talked about working at the Century House in Madison where you started cutting your teeth in the job world. And then you moved to PPD and you had some good to great coworkers. First of all, tell us what PPD is.
Pharmaceutical Product Development. So I started there as a receptionist. There were 100 people working there. And when I left 23 years later, there were 1,500 people and 14 buildings. So it had really grown. They are now they were bought out by Thermo Fisher.
Did you buy any stock?
No.
Maybe you should have. But your coworkers, those are people that you have to spend sometimes more time with your coworkers than your actual family. Touch on some of your coworkers or even bosses.
They were very good to me. I'm still in touch with a number of them today, and we get together, whether it's on Zoom or just a visit. Everybody was really kind and offered a lot of help. And the company was very accommodating. They put in the push-button doors. They purchased a chair that was higher for me because I needed that. I really wanted to work longer, but it became more difficult. And then I retired just before COVID, which was perfect timing.
Yeah, I know either people retired before it and say the same thing, perfect time to retire. And then I also know that people are thankful that they were able to work another year and a half to 2 years that maybe they weren't able to because of the restrictions and being able to work at home, or when they were at the workplace, they had to keep their distance or stay in their offices. You were able to work until you were 66 despite some physical challenges. Your bosses and coworkers you addressed, and then you would retire in 2019. Tell us how that's been going in retirement.
It was a little bit challenging because Bob had been retired 2 years, and we took a brief trip to Arizona and came back, and it was then that I had some physical pain from using my walker and traveling through the airport, and decided, traveling really isn't for me. We were stuck in the house together, and that was a challenge. And I couldn't understand. This is why it was good I wasn't working, because I would have thought I needed to be at work. And yet I was over 65, and they wanted us to all stay home if you're old like that. So it was challenging being, made to stay in the house together all the time.
We talked about this already, that we're going to have you back on, but the retirement component is kind of important to me as well. I mean, I'm still working, even though I'm retired. I'm still working. I felt the need to continue to work, but at some point, I'm going to need to say, enough is enough, and I maybe need to slow down. And being in retirement, and then having your spouse or your significant other or your life partner, now you're with them all the time. Instead of being with somebody else for 8 hours at work, now you have 8 extra hours of being with your husband. That's probably has its pluses and minuses.
Well, he took over the kitchen as far as like where things are and, that kind of stuff. So it was an adjustment, because he thought he knew more about cooking, and I had yet done that for 45 years. So, there were a couple of arguments.
Cute arguments.
Yeah, right. They're all real cute.
Currently, you are living life to the fullest. Just listening to when I came over and visited a couple days ago, and then before we started today, it's just so inspiring that somebody in a wheelchair and has to move around in a wheelchair or a walker and has got some physical challenges. You don't seem like it at all. Your Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy is stable, but you take things in stride as they happen. Tell us what you are still doing that maybe you didn't think you would be doing at 71.
I tried to get as much information as I could and to become my own advocate. And that really has helped, because nobody's going to come over to my house and say, you need to be doing this. And so I realized early on that I need, if I was going to be able to kind of keep this at bay where it's at and not allow it to progress, I would do anything in my power to keep this from getting worse. I had to take that into my own hands.
Which has allowed you then to continue to drive, but you are going to probably run into there's going to be some adaptations to your vehicle, or are there adaptations now?
Yes. I'm driving with hand controls, so there's a little computer. I've been driving that way for about 16 years.
Okay.
And I never thought I would be able to learn to drive with hand controls, but I had lessons and I learned, and
You adapted.
I did.
And then you're biking in the tricycle,
Yes.
the grown-up tricycle. You're exercising. What do you do for exercise?
Well, I try to do something different every day. So I do a lot of table exercises. I purchased a massage table. This was before COVID. It sure came in handy during COVID. And so whenever I've had PT or even OT, I practice those things. And I'm very disciplined about doing those things. Even when I've recovered from a shoulder injury, I say, well, why not continue to do those arm exercises? They're only going to help. They're not going to hurt. So that's one of my things that I do. I just try really hard to take care of what I've got.
Mm-hmm. I've heard people say that you've only got one body. You might as well take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the subscribers, followers, and listeners take out the notebooks, pens, or pencils and jot some things down. Here are Dee's 5 suggestions that have allowed her to survive and thrive while living with FSHD, Facioscapulohumeral Muscular Dystrophy. I'm going to toss these in softball style. Can you hit a softball?
Mm-hmm.
You can? Okay. I'm going to toss them on your hand, and I'm going to tell you go ahead and hit that. Number 1, you said get as much information as you can about your specific condition and be your own advocate. I really like that. I think people need to hear that more often, whether you have a condition or not. Be your own advocate. Go ahead and hit that.
Just take control of your life. As I'm losing control of my muscles, I need to take control of my schedule for exercise, my nutrition. So I try to channel, since I'm losing control here, I need to take control of something else. I'm trying not to control people. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to take control of what I can do to make my life better.
That we had a guest on, former NFL football player and former Wisconsin Badger football player, and he had a great thought or motto is control the controllables. Yes. You can control things like your schedule and how often you exercise and when you get outside, but you can't control what's going on with your body on the inside. So you are controlling the controllables. Number 2, exercise and good nutrition is so important. No one is going to do this for you. You have to be disciplined. It is vital to take care of your health. Go ahead and hit that. Number 2.
So I prioritize exercise every day. I decide when it's going to happen, and I make sure that it happens, and I make sure that it's good and not overdoing and overtiring myself. So I pace myself and make sure I have rest, hydration, all the protein, all of those things. Again, it's a bit controlling, but it works.
And you talked about protein, and protein is very vital to muscle building, muscle repair. Love it. Oh, that was a short one this time. Yeah. Number 3, do the things you can do and that you love to do. Go ahead and hit that.
Yeah, I found this to be really, really important. So if there are things you can no longer do, there are some things that are just a bit challenging, going out where there's crowds or going out to eat, for example. I have tried to find things that I love to do, knitting, bicycling, sewing, and I sew every day. I take a portion of my day and I spend that time sewing because I like it so much. It makes me feel good to do that. Why not do things that you feel really good about?
Number 4, do something for others to take the focus off yourself. Everyone has a challenge in their lives. Find a need that you can help with. It allows you to feel good. And there you go. Go ahead and hit that.
So I found an organization through RSVP, which is Retired Senior Volunteer Program. They have a strong need in the Madison area for twin-size quilts. Now, I was making something smaller, but I thought, well, let's see if I can stretch myself a bit and make it a little bit bigger. So I've been doing that and donating. And they build beds for children that have never had a bed before, which we can't even imagine, right? There's a need in the Madison area, and about 360 quilts is what they need in a year. Well, I do one a month, but it's something, and I feel good about it. I just love doing that, and I've had a lot of people donate fabric to me, to people just giving fabric away, and so I try to have their picture done, made a picture of them with the quilt that I've made to donate.
The quilting is near and dear to my heart because my grandma, who passed away a little over a year ago now, did some quilting, and quilting bee, isn't that what they're called? But she would get a group of her people, and they would make quilts. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of quilts in my possession that she did for us, and I think it was something that kept her busy, but then she also felt good about that it was going to a good home. And our last one, number 5, spend time with supportive people, and you already addressed the support group, so go ahead and hit that one.
I do have some very supportive people around me, but also originally when I first was retired and things were quiet, and I found online a Facebook group of all these people that have the same thing that I do. And I joined it, and it was amazing because now I felt less alone. And we have a monthly Zoom call, and it's just amazing because I've really only met one other person that has what I have. All these people, 25 people on a Zoom call, and they all have the same thing, and you're able to field questions and be supportive of each other. So I think regardless of what you have, I think it's really important to find a support group.
I think that's where social media gets a bad rap for some people, and in particular, people that are about in my age, 55, 56, and certainly on up, and you get a lot of opposition the higher you go in number because that's technology. I don't understand technology. You don't have to leave your house to go and talk to 25 other people, but I think you being independent and you also being open and willing for people to help you out, and in turn, you're probably a productive member of that particular group because, if somebody has FSHD, they can go into this particular Facebook group, Zoom call, and you might get one thing out of coping skill or strategy, but I guarantee you probably are going to get a lot more than that, or some ideas that people are sharing. What a great episode. I'm so glad you could join the Survive and Thrive 8791 crew today. Your story and how you have thrived after a challenging diagnosis at a young age is really inspiring. I've mentioned that a couple times, I think. Your story reminds us all to have coping skills or mental health tools in the toolbox when a person gets a life-altering diagnosis. And despite that, you have adapted and have survived, and thrived. Our call to action. Dee Squire just shared her story on what it's like to live life to the fullest despite some physical challenges. She learned to live with her situation and not let that define who she is. Here are Dee's 5 suggestions that helped her survive and thrive through some challenging times in her life. Number 1, get as much information as you can about your specific condition and be your own advocate. Number 2, exercise and good nutrition is so important. Number 3, do things you can do and love to do. Number 4, do something for others to take the focus off yourself. And number 5, spend time with supportive people. Final thoughts as we close another great episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. Are there any final thoughts, Dee?
Well, I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story, and also to thank my very supportive husband and son and his wife, the girlfriends from the pool, obviously, and from sewing group and small group from church.
And the Facebook group.
And all the PT and OT students from UW Adapted Fitness that have helped out along with this journey.
And you can't take a journey by yourself. You either need to have a roadmap or you need to have some co-pilots. And in this case, there might be relying on more than just 1 or 2 people. It's a community is helping you survive and thrive. Mm-hmm. And so many people say that they don't want the help. They don't want that. You're on the opposite. You're taking the help. You're also, it's helping your independence. It's allowing you to continue to still grow and really survive and thrive. So I'm so glad you came on today.
Thank you so much.
On our next episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we will have another amazing guest in the Buck and Honey's remote studios who will share how they learned to survive and thrive. If you have a story to share or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecora@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, and determination, you can survive and thrive. Until next time, take care.